Hello everyone, I'm Nathan Rich, an American living in China. Since I first arrived in 2012, I've been confronted by, I guess you would call them, mirrors. I'd been to Asia before, but something about this country popped mirrors up everywhere I went, each aimed directly at my face. At the time of my arrival, I felt smart, successful, if somewhat bored. I had already traveled a long and difficult road. I had been to dozens of countries and had built a solid career for myself. And all of that after going through some pretty hard times. I'd been abandoned by my family, lived on the streets, got into trouble, and worked my way out of that mess. In some ways, I felt my learning was complete. Everywhere I looked in China, though, brought reflections back at me. Customs, behaviors, and realities of the ancient country bled through like gravity from the multiverse. An invisible force within the China experience made me realize I'd spent my life viewing things using a certain perspective. One I'd been trained to use. Over the years that followed, the mirrors faded. And in that time, I've realized so much about myself. I'm forever in debt to those people I learned from and the events which took place in China. The specifics I'll leave for another medium. But know that, in my mind at least, a transformation took place. Through my experiences in this land, I've become more able to confront myself. And when one can confront oneself, one can start to do so with others. I first looked at China's history in the natural way for foreigners to do so. Initially, I thought I knew the bullet points by way of having heard about them on news sites I trusted. I thought the Chinese people were somewhat ill-informed, naive, or even brainwashed to some degree. My understanding of the events was correct. After all, Western news agencies wouldn't mislead. That would be an international scandal. I had the whole picture. The Chinese didn't have all the information. They were wrong, and I was just a little bit more knowledgeable than them about the real China. I was the one who knew what was really going on. As with most forms of arrogance, though, time was its enemy. A few bricks from the walls of my ivory tower fell one day as I casually read Western reports about incidents I already had knowledge of. The accounts seemed just a little off. I noticed over time this happened more and more. As I learned about the real China, the reports seemed further and further from the truth. I began to strongly feel that widening gap between my understanding of the Chinese experience and the experience as reported by the West. And when I investigated this issue directly, my ivory tower quaked and broke into pieces. I realized something I fear most foreigners never do, and that realization forms the foundation of my research attitude. I am not the smart one with all the information talking to slightly inept but kind people. They have a deep wisdom and knowledge of China, if not each individual, then collectively. I am the one who is ignorant, blind, and arrogant. It was a deeply profound realization. I took another look at the evidence around me and came to a rather unsettling further realization. I am not unique, but rather one of many foreigners ignorant and blind to China's true nature. I am one of many ignorant and arrogant people in the world. We're like a plague of idiots. We are obnoxious and destructive. But it's my true belief that we can be helped. Now you know how I came to start my mission of speaking to foreigners and Chinese about the way I see things. Conversations over drinks turned to constant discussions, which turned into making videos. That is the angle from which I approach this research. I want to see the truth. I let my guard down, I opened my eyes, and I'm ready to see. And with that, I began to research Chinese history for my own sake and eventually decided to attempt to get the truth out to the world. And this is that attempt. Welcome to the first video in a multi-track series about China's history, with a focus on the events leading up to and arising from the dawning of modern China. While originally planned as a 20-part, 20-hour series, I've responded to your feedback and my busy schedule and decided to release shorter videos over a longer period of time. This will result in an extended overall experience, but it will be one with much more commentary. The video you're watching now is not the main series. This video won't have any history in it, but more on that later. Because of the nature of how telling stories works in a very long series, I will be doing some catch-up each episode, and we will have more time to deal with each fascinating period. Another benefit to producing it this way is I can also create videos which focus on one single historical subject if needed. This project is the result of endless hours of research, with very long nights spent watching documentaries, reading articles and books, studying timelines and examining pictures, testimonies, and videos. To date, all work has been initiated and carried out by me, Nathan Rich. I get help with translations, subtitles, and thumbnails from Serena Hadi, but everything else has been done by me. I do the video editing and the sound editing. I do timelines and I write everything alone. I touch up historical videos and photos to the best of my abilities when possible. I designed and directed the entire program alone. I did and continue to do the research. I am the producer of these videos. To date, no one has influenced my thoughts or research direction in any way. I have received absolutely no demands, requests, or suggestions for content from anyone other than comments on my videos. The views represented in this series are mine and mine alone. I do not represent any group, company, or organization of any kind. I have not been paid or compensated in any way for these videos other than those few elite people who have decided to contribute to the project via Patreon, Subscribestar, or other means. And those generous subscribers do not dictate the subjects I cover nor the content I create. They are fully aware of that and they support the cause knowing I may say something they disagree with. I produced this series expecting full well that many or all of the episodes will be demonetized, attacked, suppressed, shadow banned, or otherwise discouraged. The production company I list on many videos, Team Hotpot, is in fact not a company at all, but a name. When I say Team Hotpot, I am referring only to myself, my girlfriend, and my 2 cats who provide morale. Those few supporters who have decided to contribute monetarily will be credited at the end of each video, including this one. Pay attention to those names. They are the only monetary support I expect this series to receive. If you enjoy this series and would like to support it, I urge you to join them. If you are unable to, fear not. You can help simply by sharing the message, it's okay to love China. Unlike my other videos, which I make for my subscribers, these history videos I also make for myself. Research for the sake of research alone is a dull blade, hacking at butter, sloppy, unfocused, and messy. Research for a story played out to the world is a razor blade cutting wire. Clear, concise, purpose-built. That's how I like to learn and share. This series will be a step-by-step adventure that you and I will go on together. This is one of the largest and most important stories that can ever be told. On top of that, my research is mostly limited to English language sources. Because of that limitation and the fact that I'm doing everything myself, I have no illusions that this will be the best history series in the world. On the contrary, I hope only that it can be useful in dispelling some of the fog and haze around these deeply important events. And like you, I hope to learn this wonderful history for myself. I have no chance to cover every incident that occurred, so I will focus on those which are interesting and important to me. I may skip things you thought were important, and I may delve tediously deep into the seemingly inconsequential. In short, I will talk about what I want to talk about. And it's likely that it will be different than what some viewers want. Those who disagree with this approach are free to produce their own history series. Though I warn them now, so many I see online today are false, wildly incomplete, inaccurate, or just plain dull. Those who are used to making vlog-style videos in which they simply walk around talking to themselves may find this level of production daunting. There's no room for vain conceit when telling this story. It's too epic. Many will discover a problem when they step up to the plate. Either you can get something done in an unconvincing, boring, and ineffective way, or you can be eternally bogged down in the endless search for every truth that exists. I have accepted the fact that I will make mistakes, and I will not be able to portray every event. You will need to accept that for us to continue comfortably. No one can represent everything in a documentary. With no external budget, no team, no company, no office, no funding or investment beyond my personal contributions, no sponsors, and likely very few monetized videos, this entire multi-year project will cost me dearly. For those of you who have met me in person, you know I never shut up about this fascinating history. You already know the truth. I make this series because I am passionate about getting the truth out to the world. I will make it for all of us. This series will focus primarily on China's so-called 100 years of humiliation, including what I believe led up to it and what came from it. While the majority of this story is unknown to Westerners, certainly Asians will have more knowledge and personal investment into the characters, countries, and plots involved. Make no mistake, however, even for those well-versed in history, I can promise you exposure to images, facts, and details you didn't know existed. But no matter who we all are, there is a danger ahead. This story will expose some of the darkest and most painful experiences in the Earth's long history. We will talk about not just the few bright moments China's had, but also the vast depths of human suffering. We will upset people, this much is almost guaranteed. But it is not the goal. It's important to remember that next to no one mentioned in this series is alive today, and certainly no one for the majority of the story. That's the most critical thing. These videos are not to be taken as a call to action, or as support of hatred, revenge, or even ill feelings against anyone who is alive today. This story is not commentary or prescription for the world we live in today. Also, we need to remember that it is possible to forgive without forgetting. And even if forgiveness is not possible, hatred is not inevitable. Hatred is a negative emotion which drains positivity and breeds more negativity. This series is not about hate. This series is about the love and awe I feel for China. If you come away from this series hating someone or some people, I have failed you as a storyteller. If you come away feeling a deeper sense of respect, love, and awe for the Chinese people based on the real events of the past and the way I interpret them, I have succeeded. I have made very few assumptions in my research and have approached each incident from the perspective of someone who knows nothing. No matter what I've heard about a person, place, or event, I research each as if I have never heard of them at all. Because honestly, before this research, I had almost no knowledge in the area, contrary to what I may have believed. And now, a note on semantics. Before the main track begins in a future video, I'd like to give a clarification about how Chinese may appear written and pronounced in this series. For those without familiarity, modern Chinese is represented in one of two major sets of characters, traditional and simplified. For example, we normally call this man Sun Yat-sen. His name was written like this, but can now also be written like this. Confusing? There's more. Accounting for differences among neighboring towns and cities, spoken Chinese has literally thousands of variants. In standardized Chinese called Mandarin, this man's name is pronounced Sun Zhongshan. Though he did speak Mandarin, he natively spoke Cantonese, which means he would have pronounced these characters quite differently. One way to Romanize the Cantonese pronunciation of these characters gives us this, and that's why we say Sun Yat-sen. Romanization means transcribing the sounds using the Roman script, which leaves us with something a Westerner can vaguely pronounce. There are other ways to Romanize the Cantonese pronunciation of his name. But of course, the majority of Chinese people don't speak Cantonese, so they would Romanize his name like this. But that's only one of a few ways to Romanize Mandarin pronunciation. If that sounds confusing to you, it's because you haven't yet felt confusion. It's because you're new to all of this and your information hasn't gone deep yet. You are wading in a kiddie pool next to the deepest abyss, complaining you can't touch the floor with your toes anymore, as the current gently nudges you over into the darkness. These three characters are not the only way to refer to this man. In fact, this name, the name the world calls him, isn't even his birth name. He had many names. Here are some other names for this man, some of which contain or consist of titles. Each one can be written in simplified or traditional characters, and each comes with multiple sets of meanings combined and per character, and multiple hundreds or thousands of theoretical pronunciations and romanizations. These characters are also known in related languages within China, which can also be romanized. And romanizations have variants within, for example, presence or lack of tone markers. And written Chinese can and has been done so in multiple directions, like left to right or right to left. I make no exaggeration when I tell you there are literally millions of ways to communicate the name of this man in China. Millions. As you can see, this entire series could literally be spent only on discussing the names for everything. In fact, there are many problems like these in telling a massive story. So, in the interest of transparency, I've decided to lay out some of my methodology up front. This will put us on the same page. These are some of the guiding principles I have adopted to lighten, if only slightly, the effort required to move forward. In the interest of not endlessly confusing everyone and getting bogged down in term semantics, I will generally not put preference on using names as they were at the time, but rather on what I choose to call them now. For example, you may not realize that Beijing has had many names over the centuries. In this series, however, I will only refer to it as Beijing unless doing otherwise is interesting or important. The same goes for Sun Yat-sen and everyone else. Also, and this was a tough decision for me, at least for the time being, I will not provide sources for each claim, as doing so will be prohibitively laborious. I encourage people to verify any claims they find to be against their intuition or recollection. I do urge, however, the matter is approached with the utmost charity given. I am attempting to represent my personal opinion about things, on top of actual facts. I have found a great deal of fascinating testimonial, graphical, and other sources, not all of which are easily found online. But all of my claims will be based on my understanding of the actual truth. I am not attempting to doctor facts to make a point. There is a very big difference between trying to tweak information to create facts and using facts to create information. If many people are in doubt about something and request sources, I will do my best to provide them. But in the interest of my own sanity, I generally won't proactively produce them. Because so much of history is poorly documented, we often need to rely on estimates for body counts, costs, army sizes, and so on. This raises a strange problem for the documentary creator. Must I constantly say, for example, there were between 400 and 7,000 troops. They attacked between 600 and 2,000 enemies. Should I always assume the highest number for everything? Average them out? No. I've made a conscious decision about this issue. For the purpose of this series, I will use the number that I personally believe is correct, which will nearly always be based on recognized estimates. I will use a combination of my intuition, experience, rationale, and weighing of sources for bias and reliability. The intent of this series is, after all, to express my experience of China's history, which necessarily relies on how I understand the facts. In the next video, I will introduce the background of the story, with an overly terse description of China before 1513, after which we'll slow down a bit until 1711, which will bring another slowdown. We will settle in on a comfortable pace and continue from there. I am trying desperately to avoid the eons of history before this story begins, so I will ask everyone to please excuse my rather inadequate coverage of China's long past. It's not meant as a skimp, but rather a hurried avoidance in hopes of being able to move on to the tiny window of time I've decided to look through. I will do no justice to the elaborate history before 1513, and very little justice before the 19th century. While this story has been told numerous times before, I have not been able to find a telling in line with my perspective on the matter. And even though we will never know the real truth about the universe and its history, we can and should continue to explore all perspectives. That is my belief. I don't hope to change your mind about anything, only to share with you this adventure of mind expansion. For it's during this process of discovery that we find tangible reasons to cherish and respect Chinese people and their culture. Beyond compassion and intuition for their own sakes, these stories feed us facts and events that force us to grow as people. For non-Chinese hearing this story for the first time, I urge you to listen as dispassionately as possible to the fascinating and impressive tale ahead of you. I can tell you one thing beyond a reasonable doubt. Nearly no one in the West understands China, yet many think they might. With the constant barrage of politicized information out there, I hope to share with you some of how I see things in China's past, and by extension, its present. I hope you will be able to gain something from this experience. I know I will. Through research to date, I already have. I will avoid no topics and will explore every avenue that I feel is interesting. Especially disturbing episodes will be clearly labeled as such in the beginning moments. No attempt to offend will be included in this series, but most humans will surely find something to be offended by. This is not the intention. As an aside, I do not recommend children below a certain age watch certain episodes of this series. Any parents or guardians of children or sensitive people should consider themselves cautioned. This series should be pre-screened for content. Together we will explore this amazing story, looking for new vantage points, new points of view, new knowledge to be gained from old news. That is our goal. Because I am not a conventional man, I don't expect this series to be conventional. There will be many moments in which people will be puzzled by my focus. Why didn't he talk about what this famous general was thinking during that battle? Why was his discussion of this event so heavily focused on peasants rather than on the mayor of the town? Or, that's not how we learned it. I don't often consider great people as interesting as the common ones. I don't tend to focus on the same thing others do. I will describe things and lean in on areas I feel are important or interesting. And because I rarely find people with a similar past and outlook to me, it's very likely you will disagree with ways I've covered some events. Expecting this to happen up front will soften the inevitable blow when it does. The schema for this series may shift over time, but the initial design is as follows. I will have a main track of videos. These will be sequential, the big picture. Those are what I refer to as the main playlist or the main track. Additionally, I will have videos like this one, which will have relevant updates or additional production information. These will be on a separate playlist. There will be a third track with detailed subjects for those who are more interested in a deeper dive. They may not be entirely sequential, but the hope is to keep them in line with the main track. And finally, there will be some kind of behind-the-scenes playlist. These will have no bearing on the story itself and are entirely optional. They will give some insight on how I do my research and how much work this series takes. These videos may be shocking as well. In these politically sensitive times, it's often shouted out, not all criminals are guilty, not all people do this, not all countries are like that. If you followed my other work, you may realize I don't think anything is all. There is no such thing as black or white, only shades of gray closer and further from each other. I often say things like, Chinese people feel this way, or Americans usually don't do this or that. It's shorthand for a lot of Chinese people that I know of feel this way, and a lot of Americans I can think of usually don't do this or that. I won't be bogged down by constantly qualifying every generality I make with a warning that it doesn't encompass all of that group. I will be as clear as possible when I actually mean all or none. For example, if there were no survivors of an incident, I will try to be clear that I literally mean no one survived. If I say, after all, no one likes to be sunburned, I am not being scientifically specific. I hope that makes sense to everyone. And by everyone, I don't literally mean every single person on Earth. I am not generally a politically correct person. That is to say, I don't focus heavily on the feelings of my viewers when I speak. If people are offended when I say mankind and request that I say peoplekind instead, I won't. Other people can be as PC as they like, but I am who I am and I won't apologize for my views, nor will I capitulate to those who try to change how I speak. If someone is too triggered or offended by the words I use to see the larger picture, I present that as evidence of their own internal harmony lost. While I do feel sad they are experiencing some level of discomfort within themselves, we all will carry on. Our world moves to soundbite-based videos and aims for durations of under 30 seconds. However, in this series, I will take my time to discuss and delve in wherever seems interesting. I will not rush. Other than the first few episodes which deal with periods outside the focus, I will not skimp or skip, and that will be painfully slow for some. The video releases will be slower than many others because I do everything myself, so be prepared for a very long-term commitment by continuing down this path with me. I'm talking about years. Again, I will not rush these videos. I will never ever rush these history videos. And no matter how long it takes me to do the next one, I will suffer through it in an impossible effort to make it the quality the story deserves. Whether there is an interest in this series or not, I will try to tell the complete story as I see it, for I feel it is of the utmost importance to the world. Misunderstanding and undervaluing of these events have, in my opinion, led to some of the widest cultural divides in the world. It's my hope that this story will serve as a small step in the direction of global understanding and peace. We can always aim high. If you believe these videos are beneficial, support them in any way you can. If you believe it's okay to love China, tell someone. And if you believe you know the history of epic China, we're going to see about that. Thanks everyone. 谢谢.